All right, guys, so today we are in Mark chapter 1, and we're going to be going through part 2 of this chapter, covering verse 21 through 45. And there's a couple sections within this second part of chapter 1, including the casting out of a demon while Jesus is teaching at a synagogue, also the healing of a relative of Peter, and also a healing of a leper towards the end of this chapter. So we're going to cover this in Mark. Lastly, I wanted to mention there is a unique textual variant in Mark chapter 1, particularly verse 41, which is not insignificant. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and I'll try to give you my thoughts on that. But in verse 21, it says, Then they went to Capernaum. When the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. So, of course, Sabbath is Saturday on our calendar time, and so Jesus went there in Capernaum to teach the Old Testament scrolls, as they would always gather on Saturday to do, and he began to teach. So I wanted to show you a quick picture. I've actually had the great opportunity of being able to go to Israel myself and see these places with my own eyes, and some of the different archaeological sites and different evidences. But I just wanted to show you, this was just a cool little picture here of just some tile right before you walk into Capernaum, kind of like a toll that you go through here. And the other picture here I wanted to show you, especially in case you wanted to screenshot some of this information. This is from one of the signposts there. I'll try to zoom in so you can get that. There we go. Hopefully you can, if you want to screenshot. But what you can see there when you go is the foundation of this site. The whole thing's not there, but this would date back to 3rd or 4th century, and probably the synagogue in Jesus' time would look very similar, if not the same, to this very organization and layout. So it's kind of cool to think of that and what that would have been like, and exactly how it was structured. So I just wanted to show that. Pretty cool. If you ever get the chance to go to Israel, I'd highly encourage it. It's worth the time and the money, so long as you do your study before you go and you know what to look for when you get there. The place in which Jesus did ministry is really not a huge area. The Sea of Galilee is kind of in the center of a few different towns and places, and so know that Jesus did all his ministry by foot. He would walk from one place to another, or maybe get in a boat to go from one place to another. So there are lots of towns mentioned in the Gospels, but recognize they're all in a very, very short distance that you could reach by foot or by boat if a body of water, right, like the Sea of Galilee, was separating. So keep that in mind. So Jesus is in the synagogue, he's teaching. In verse 22, it says, the people there were amazed by his teaching, because he taught them like one who had authority, not like the experts in the law. So if you can imagine with me what it would be like to hear Jesus teaching, if someone like me, say a type of a pastor, gets up on a Sunday and is preaching in your church, I'm going to teach you some of the Bible. I may reference some pastors that are dead. I may reference some Bible scholars that are alive or dead. And I may point to some evidences. Whereas the experts in the law, they would do the same thing. They would probably be speaking of their research and this and that. Whereas Jesus isn't doing this. It says he's teaching them, as you see right here in the text, like one who had authority. Okay, so he is teaching as if he's in charge, because he is, because he's God. And so he's not referencing anyone probably. He's not, unless it's his own writings from the Old Testament, he's not fact-checking himself. He's just giving the truth, and he's not saying, well, God might forgive this or God will forgive that. He's definitively speaking, I will do this, I will forgive. Think of his word choices and how the whole message or sermon would be very different from something that you would hear from a mere man. And so, of course, they're picking up on this when they hear him teach as someone who is in charge or has the authority of God. So I want you to notice that. It says in verse 23, just then there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "Leave us alone, Jesus the Nazarene. Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him. Silence come out of him. So this is an interesting passage. Jesus is teaching in the synagogue, and of course, there's someone possibly in the back of the room or something like this, either directly during his teaching or directly after his teaching, where he just cries out in the middle of not a huge room, small enough, big enough to hold a lot of people, but small enough that everybody's seeing what's going on. And notice what this unclean spirit or demon says. He says, "Leave us alone." So it seems to be that multiple demons were inside of this man. And they also have divine knowledge, okay? No one knew, for the most part, most of the time, not even the disciples knew that Jesus was God. And so when they hear Jesus, they think, oh, he's a great prophet, he's a great teacher, some of the same things you may hear today. But the demons, they recognize his divinity, and they say, "I know who you are, the Holy One of God." They recognize that he is the second member of the Trinity. And it comes out immediately. And part of that is because they're demons, they're demonic spirits. They've been around for a very long time, and they see things in a realm that we don't see. And so they can clearly see Jesus is the second member of the Trinity in ways that the rest of the people could not see with their eyes. And so this guy, or rather the demons within this man, cry out, "Leave us alone, Jesus the Nazarene. Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." So they ask him if he is there to destroy them because he's in charge over them, even though he's allowed them to reign and roam freely on the earth. And so they say that. Then they recognize his divinity, which is a very big deal, because as you'll see throughout the Gospels, Jesus is always trying to keep his divinity a secret. He doesn't want everyone to know. He only tells his few disciples at given points in time, but he does not go around flaunting, "Hey, I'm God." He mentions it and it's referenced. He's clear about it, but he's not trying to shout it from the rooftops just yet, because he has a divine mission he's trying to fulfill before he's crucified. And so this is all in fulfillment of prophecy, might I add. But they cry out, "Leave us alone, Jesus the Nazarene. Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him. Silence come out of him. So as I just mentioned, Jesus is trying to keep this a secret, and Jesus does not want everyone to know for reasons we'll talk about later as we go through the gospel. But he tells them silence and then come out of him. So he wants the demons to leave this man. And what it says in verse 26, after throwing him into convulsions, the unclean spirit cried out with a loud voice and came out of him. I won't go into too much detail. This is common in an exorcism. Demons, they are in control sometimes of speech or of the body, depending on the sin, depending upon how many demons and how demonized a person is. But we see here, Jesus commands, God himself commands silence come out of him, and the demons still have the power to cause this man to go into convulsions. And then also the unclean spirit, after throwing him into convulsions, then cries out with a loud voice and comes out of him. This is typical response within exorcism. Sometimes there's all kinds of crazy things that happen. I'm trying to avoid. Maybe in another series, I'd like to go into extreme depth of demonology so that we could understand all these various. There's so many things to learn and know about this, but I just want to stick to the text. So if you'd like to hear a series kind of talking about this stuff in more depth, just leave that comment in the section down below. Let me know. I'd love to go into greater detail, but I do want to focus on the text. So I just want to pull out what's in here. So Jesus commands him. They don't immediately leave. They throw them into convulsions, and then with a loud cry, then they leave. And it says in verse 27, they were all amazed so that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He even commands the unclean spirits, and they obey him." So what I want you to notice here is that Jesus is giving new teaching here. Jesus is giving a fulfillment of teaching. So at least in the sense, even though he's maybe majority quoting from Isaiah, there's certain things that Jesus says that have not been said before. There's certain things that Jesus teaches that are new teaching. And he's allowed to do this. He's God. He has the prerogative. So Jesus is not only giving new teaching, which is a big deal, something to be taken very seriously. You can't just give new teaching. But he's confirming it with signs and miracles. He's confirming it by casting out a demon, which of course shows his power and authority here. And his authority to teach these new teachings is immediately shown with the casting out of an unclean spirit or a demon. And it says that they were all amazed so that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching with authority." As I just explained, he even commands the unclean spirits, and they obey him. So the news about him spread quickly throughout all the region around Galilee. That's a hard story to keep to yourself. I'm sure it did. So I don't want to go too far into this, but the Bible does not speak a lot about demons or demonic possession until the ministry of Jesus. I don't have all the reasons for that. I'd like to explore that, but it's not something we see clearly in this kind of almost like an epidemic proportions. Like it seems like wherever Jesus goes, there's just demons everywhere. There's possession everywhere. And earlier in the Old Testament, you don't see that as often. I think there's some different reasons for that. I won't go into that as well. Like I said, if I do an exhaustive series on demonology, I'll cover some of that type stuff. But there's clearly demons all around when Jesus is teaching. And I think there's some things that we can learn from the Dead Sea Scrolls and from the intertestamental period texts that seems to be reflected in the New Testament, that they were in line with the New Testament writers, and Jesus were in line with some of the rabbinic and Jewish thought and positions on demons and such, and that they were on the same page, and so that they draw heavily from each other here. So I just wanted to mention that, but you won't find exhaustive detail and answers for some of these things in the scriptures, but we do see that in the New Testament, these writers did hold the same kind of theology of the time concerning these things in the Dead Sea Scrolls or in Jewish tradition of this time. In verse 29, it says, "Now as soon as they left the synagogue, they entered Simon and Andrew's house." So Peter and his brother that we just mentioned in part 1 of this chapter, with James and John. As we mentioned, Jesus has just called these 4 brothers to come and follow him, and they have left everything. And so they're all together in the synagogue, we can imagine. And then also right after they leave the synagogue, they go to Peter's house, Simon and Andrew. And it says Simon's mother-in-law was lying down sick with a fever, so they spoke to Jesus at once about her. So we see that Peter's wife, her mother, is not feeling well. She has a fever, and they go and talk to Jesus at once about her. Obviously, they know he has divine authority. They don't really know, to my knowledge, exactly who he is yet, but they know somewhat of what's going on. He's someone with authority. He's someone sent by God. Little do they know he is God. So they go speak to Jesus. It says, verse 31, he came and raised her up by gently taking her hand. So he's picking her up off of the bed, holding her hand. It says, then the fever left her and she began to serve them. So Jesus is like, girl, get back to work and be a good host for us at the house. So he lifts her up. Her fever leaves, and then she's feeling great. She goes on to serve them. wait on them, probably serve them a meal. The old Sunday lunch here going on, Sabbath lunch. And so it says, when it was evening, verse 32, after sunset, they brought to him all who were sick and demon-possessed. This is really important, verse 32. I want to show there's distinguished here really, and in 32 through 34, there is distinguishing of sickness, disease, and demon possession. So what I want to say about this, what we see in the New Testament text is that oftentimes demon possession is associated with mental illness or is associated with physical ailment or disease. But sometimes as well, there is physical ailment, sickness, mental illness, etc., that is uncorrelated to demonic possession. So we need to be wise and discerning when we try to diagnose and address these issues. We don't need to go the atheist route and say, well, demon possession is not real, so whatever it is, it's not a demon. You have this with guys like Dr. Phil or Oprah Winfrey, where you can go look up old episodes where they have literally demon-possessed people on their show and they just flat out deny it. It's kind of weird, kind of creepy. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you can have maybe in the hyper-charismatic side of things where everything's a demon, and this is clearly not the case within the text. So focus on the text. It'll guide you to the right answer. So verse 32, it's evening, they have Sabbath, they have worship, Jesus casts out demons, they spend some time together. After sunset that night, it says that they are bringing all who are sick and demon-possessed. So anyone that's messed up in the town, bring him to Jesus. He's going to fix it. So it says the whole town gathered by the door. Verse 33, that's crazy. So if you can imagine, they're in this little house and it is packed full. This dude just cast out a demon earlier during worship today. And so if anybody's got any problems, they're all beginning to show up. This isn't something you can really keep secret. And so the whole town, it says, is gathered by the door. And then verse 34, so he healed many who were sick with various diseases and drove out many demons. As I said before, there is clear distinction between disease and demonic possession. And while these do overlap, we see in other texts where a demon is causing a physical ailment or problem. That's not always the case. So we need to be wise. We need to be discerning when we are diagnosing these things, especially if you're someone in that kind of a role, or just as an average everyday Christian, we need to be discerning with this. So he drives out many demons, and it says, but he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. Right? And this is the text, verse in the same vein as what we just read earlier. It's that Jesus is trying to conceal his identity as the Son of God. And ultimately, this is because of Isaiah 53's prophecy that he is going to be the one to be a sacrifice for many. So if they know that he is God in the flesh, they're not going to sacrifice him, and he won't fulfill his mission. So he's keeping this a secret. He doesn't want the demons to speak and go into depth to explain who he is. He wants the gospel to be preached, and he wants people to affirm it or reject it. And he wants people to do what they're going to do without divine intervention from the demons. Next it says in verse 35, it says, then Jesus got up early in the morning when it was still very dark, departed and went out to a deserted place, and there he spent time in prayer. It seems to be he spent a significant amount of time in prayer. And what I want you to notice in verse 35 is Jesus' example as a Christian, as a minister. He's up late that night, literally casting out demons and healing people of sicknesses after sunset, so it's dark. He's staying up late doing this. I'm sure he didn't get to bed until late. And then it says he gets up early the next morning, so Jesus is dodging sleep here to make time for the Lord, to make time for prayer. So that's just a good example from Jesus, that even late at night he's up, but early up the next morning for prayer. We see that his relationship with the Father is of high value to him and is prominent. And we go on to see in verse 36, it says, Simon and his companions searched for him. Verse 37, when they found him, they said, everyone is looking for you. He replied, "Let us go elsewhere into the surrounding villages so that I can preach there too, for that is what I came out here to do." So Jesus gets up super early to go pray. He goes to a place, as you can imagine, that dealing with huge crowds can get exhausting. And so Jesus needs time to recharge. He needs time to pray, spend with the Father. He gets up early, doesn't tell anyone. He just goes to pray. Kind of like when he was a kid. He just stayed at the synagogue and his parents lost him. But anyways, he's out there. His disciples go out looking for him. When they finally find him, he's like, "All right, let's go into these other villages." And he says this. He says, "So that I can preach there too, for this is what I came out here to do." So Jesus' main goal here is to preach this kingdom of God, to preach this gospel message. So while exorcisms and healings of various diseases, while all these things are important to the ministry of Jesus, what Jesus puts as the primacy, or the first thing, or the thing of most importance, is that of his preaching, sharing the gospel with people. So this is such a great example, something really interesting and important to take note of. In verse 39, it says, "So he went out into all of Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons." And so we see this same pattern. Jesus is in all of Galilee. He's preaching in all the different synagogues. This is obviously a summary of multiple events, and casting out of demons. There are demons present all over. And I think I just need to mention this here. The site at which Jesus will cover when we get there, Mount Hermon, this is right around, it's in Israel. This is the place where, according to Jewish tradition, the angels descended in Genesis 6. And so I think one of the reasons we may have for the vast amount of demonic in his area is because of, if this tradition is true, that this place is in the backyard. So I just wanted to mention that. I just wanted to show a quick picture. This is actually me standing right here at the shore of the Sea of Galilee. A really cool picture. You can't see it as well here because it's kind of cloudy, but back here in the background you can see a little foothill, small tiny mountain, and you can't see it as well here, but this is a very, very tiny place. This last part of the verse, as we just read, he went into all of Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons. Like I said, seems like this is just how ministry was done for Jesus. He goes, he preaches in a synagogue, and maybe they're within, at the synagogue or around that, or around the time period of that, there's demons showing up and needing to be cast out. This last section here of Mark chapter 1 is this story of a leper. So let's get into this. There's some interesting things. So verse 40, it says, "Now a leper came to him and fell to his knees, asking for help. 'If you are willing, you can make me clean,' he said." So let's mention a few things about this verse, this section 40 through 45. So this is an episode that is recorded in all three of the synoptic gospels, being that of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so obviously we're in Mark. So this story is in in Matthew and in Luke. But what's interesting about this story is there's certain details in here that are specific to the book of Mark. So now a leper came to him. So this could be Hansen's disease. This is something where your flesh is eating itself, rotting away. You're possibly losing your digits, your fingers, your toes. And so he comes before him, falls to his knees, asking for help. So a very desperate situation, a very sad sight to see. And he says to Jesus, "If you are willing, you can make me clean," he said. Now, all three of the synoptic gospels record this identically. So one of the helpful things about the synoptic gospels is you have three separate eyewitness testimony accounts. So sometimes certain ones have particular details than others. For example, the book of Mark, as it was so heavily influenced by Peter, we see insights into Peter's life, like his name Simon, which is really interesting to note. So Mark's gospel has a little detail here in verse 41 that we're about to look at that is not found in Matthew or Luke. So this desperate man with leprosy, some kind of skin disease, we're not entirely sure, but obviously a very severe skin disease, comes before Jesus. He says, "If you're willing, you can make me clean." So he doesn't know if Jesus is willing to heal him, but he knows or believes that he can heal him if he so desires. And verse 41 is where we get a significant textual variant. But I'll just read this. "Moved with compassion, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, 'I am willing, be clean,'" or "be made clean." So we see here a textual variant, and I just want to mention something very briefly. I found a lot of different opinions and a lot of different things to be said about this in all the research I was doing. So the major textual variant that we get that in verse 41, it's only in it's this one word, okay? It's this one word, "moved with compassion" or "compassion." It's also possibly other manuscripts will read moved with, or indignant or angry, moved with anger. And the reason for this is found in something called the Codex Bezae, if I'm saying that right. All I know about this is not something I've been taught, it's just things I read and do research. So sometimes when I pronounce things, they may be pronounced wrong. But it's from this Codex Bezae, which is written in both Latin and in Greek, where it has the translation of indignation or anger. And this is, as this actually mentions, so the NET Bible that I'm using is the first edition, so they translate this "moved with compassion." I had some trouble because as I was eating my breakfast this morning and reading through this passage on my iPhone on the app, which you can get a free app of the NET Bible, it's in the second edition, and they actually changed it to "moved with indignation." So you got compassionate Jesus or angry Jesus, depending on what you're reading. The other translation that translates this to indignation, that's a tongue twister, is I believe the NIV 2011 edition. So I wanted to address this because this isn't just me from my weird Bible, the NET that no one's heard about. Sorry, NET scholars, thank you for this book. But also the NIV, which is the most popular translation of the English Bible, like I said, depending upon the version that you have. So I wanted to mention this. It is from this codex and maybe a few scattered manuscripts. The majority of manuscripts do read "moved with compassion." And I right now, as far as I know, from the little few hours of research that I've done on this, it seems to be, I would lean towards compassion. And I wrote some notes down here. I just wanted to mention this variant seems to survive today in Arabic, in Latin, in Armenian, and in Syriac. And possibly this is from what maybe happened where the Bible, for this particular manuscript tradition that reads this, was translated from one language to another, and then instead of going back to the original sources for this manuscript that we read, it was translated from one language to another language and then to another language. When usually how most Bibles are translated today, we take into account the thousands of manuscripts, and we do a new translation from the Greek, the Hebrew, or from the Septuagint, which is completely Greek. it depends on how they do it. So sometimes, like, for example, the HCSB was a complete, from my understanding, a complete reworking of the original languages. And then the CSB, they just took all the work that they had done from the HCSB, and then for the CSB, kind of updated it, if you will. And then, so depending upon the school of thought for the manuscript tradition that you choose, for the eclectic text or the Textus Receptus, etc., etc., then you have the text which you choose from, and then you have the translation and interpretation, etc., etc. So I don't want to go too far into this. I know this isn't a channel focused on textual variants, but I just want to bring these things out to you so you hear it from a Christian, someone who believes the Bible is God's word and that it has been faithfully passed down, not from someone who's an atheist or an agnostic who's trying to use this to cause you to doubt your faith and the whole entire New Testament because of one word. And so, like I said, the majority of texts all lean towards compassion, but there is some different work. There's a dissertation that was written I think a few decades ago, 1 or 2 decades ago, that was written on this topic, and there's some reasons to believe on both sides. So what I'm trying to do here with this is I just want to say that whatever translation is true, whether it's compassion or anger, it doesn't really change any core doctrine for Christians. It doesn't change any really much of the story. So sadly, we can't just look at another gospel and it has this detail, because this detail is for the inner working of the heart of Jesus, for why he does what he does, is specific to the Gospel of Mark. So in all the Gospels, including this one, what's not in doubt is if Jesus healed this man. So we need to keep that in mind. What's in question is if he's angry or if he's feeling compassionate, and that's why he does what he does. And even with the, let's say that we don't know if he's angry or he's compassionate, there's so many possibilities of what this could be, and this doesn't cause us to doubt anything about the character of Jesus. We have endless stories of the type of person Jesus was. We have so much, and so this one word, while it is important, while it's something that we shouldn't gloss or skip over, it's not something that's going to change our Christology or our understanding of who Jesus is. All this is going to say is, okay, maybe he's angry because this guy is doubting his ability to or willingness to heal. He seems to have some belief that he can heal him, but he's not sure if Jesus is the kind of man that's going to heal him. So maybe Jesus is frustrated and says, I am willing, be clean, exclamation point. Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe Jesus is angry with the ravage of sin. There's so many possibilities that this could be. And none of these disprove anything or change anything about who Jesus is. So don't let this be a stumbling block for you. And the reason I bring it up is because I don't want to hide you from the Bible. I want to give you exactly the truth for how it is and let you decipher it for your own. Or of course, with the other thing I want to mention, with anger, Jesus gets angry. Jesus shows righteous anger all throughout the New Testament. If you didn't know that, read the book of Revelation. So this shouldn't freak us out. Oh my gosh, was Jesus angry? Yes, he was angry all throughout the Gospels. There's things that make Jesus angry all throughout the New Testament, the Old Testament. So keep that in mind. And if he's moved with compassion, we know Jesus is so loving and compassionate. This shouldn't freak us out either. So like I said, this doesn't significantly alter our view of Jesus in any way. And likewise, as I said, this doesn't significantly in any way alter this event, this story, because this is recorded in all three Gospels. So we know in all three Gospels, it's 3 times affirmed that Jesus heals this leper. And we have most of these details, but this one specific detail, there is a slight variation in the manuscripts, and I don't think this should cause you any worry. It doesn't cause me any worry. It doesn't freak me out. I think, like I said, I'm undecided on the issue. Really, I'd like to spend many more hours of research in this before I would say, well, I think it's this. It could be either one, but regardless of what it is, I'm not going to lose a wink of sleep over it. But I do want to faithfully teach this to you as well and not gloss over this. I did want to mention something Bruce Metzger had said that I thought was not unimportant. The original Syriac Ephraim, he had pity, is the homonym of Ephraim. He was enraged. So when the latter word was translated into the other languages, such as appeared in Greek, the variant reading possibly appeared there. And however, some copyists, such as the Arabic translation of the Diatessaron in the Armenian language, does not copy the same error but preserves the meaning, he had pity. So very possible the most accurate reading is that of compassion. And like I said, the early church fathers are helpful in this as they speak to this issue. Sadly, the book that I usually use, I really love this. Thomas Oden, before he died, was I believe the general editor of this series where they translated the early church fathers into English. And so they actually have no notes on that commentary series on that portion of that verse. They do address the verse, but they don't address any of that. So anyways, keep that in mind. Like I said, maybe if this channel is around a long time, I'd like to do a whole series unpacking any textual variants. They're very minimal. None of them in any way challenge or change any of our core doctrines or beliefs. But I will bring those up as we study the scriptures together and let you decide for yourself. So a leper comes to him, falls on his knees, asking for help. If you're willing, you can make me clean. He said, moved with compassion. Some manuscripts read indignation. Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be clean. So Jesus would seemingly be breaking Old Testament law because you're not allowed to touch a person who's unclean. Also, as customary to the law, this man would have to have walked, really had to be separate from the group. But if he was, when people are in distance from him, they have to shout unclean, unclean to keep their distance. Kind of like we're doing if you're watching this around 2020, 2021, social distancing. They even did it back in Jesus' day. So it's interesting that he touches him because this is against Old Testament law. I don't really have a great answer for this other than he's God. We know that Jesus fulfills the law in every way. Maybe Jesus can't be made unclean. Maybe Jesus can never, receive leprosy in this kind of way. So maybe he's immune. Don't know. But he does this. He reaches out, touches him. That's what the text says. Immediately, Jesus, after this man is made clean, sent the man away with a very strong warning. Verse 44, he told him, see that you do not say anything to anyone, but go, show yourself to a priest. This was as commanded in the Mosaic law. Show yourself to a priest and bring the offering that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. So Jesus is telling him to follow Old Testament law. So we have this weird mixture. Jesus is God. He's doing a new thing. He's got new teachings. He's got new authority that they've never seen. He's even healing people in a new way. But specific to him, he's doing things different. But for them, he's commanding them to keep the Old Testament law. He's commanding, and in majority of the ways, Jesus follows the Old Testament law, or in ways that we might look on and see that he's breaking Old Testament law, he is giving us a more proper hermeneutic, a proper understanding of that law. So go show yourself to a priest, bring the offering Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. This is a law that we find in Leviticus 14, verse 1 through 32, where these extensive directions for what to do when you are sick with a disease are spelled out to the letter. And he says that he wanted him to do this. I want you to notice this in verse 44. Show yourself to a priest, bring the offering that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. So Jesus is trying to evangelistically reach out to the scribes, the Pharisees, to the priests. This is not insignificant. Jesus wants this man to be a testimony, his healing. He wants him to not just be this rogue that got healed and went on with his life, but he's this guy that got healed and then he's following Old Testament law, and then he is, through this obedience, giving himself as a worthy testimony to the priests. So that's Jesus' stern command for this man that he warns him with. And then verse 45, it says, but as the man went out, he began to announce it publicly and spread the story widely, so that Jesus was no longer able to enter any town openly, but stayed outside in remote places. Still, they kept coming to him from everywhere. So this guy goes against Jesus' command. We see here in verse 44, see that you do not say anything to anyone, but just go show the priest. Instead, this guy just goes and tells everyone, right? And in one sense, yeah, who can blame him? He just got healed supernaturally. But in the other sense, the guy that healed him supernaturally gave him a stern warning. The least he could have done was be obedient, but he wasn't. And so he goes, he announces it publicly. He tells everyone. He says he spread the story widely, and to the point that so many people are finding out about Jesus, so many people are learning about him, he cannot even enter a town without everyone recognizing him. And he's now forced to stay outside in remote places because the immense crowds that are even coming to him in these deserted, remote places. They're still coming to see him in the middle of nowhere. So that is the end of Mark chapter 1. Very awesome chapter, interesting chapter. So much in here to apply to our lives. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that I talked about concerning the text, the theology of the text, the application of the text, maybe textual criticism, if you have any questions, please leave those down below in the comment section. I'd happily address those. I pray this blesses you, and hope you'll tune in for Mark chapter 2 as we continue on unpacking God's Word and what it has for us. Thank you, and God bless you.